In our headlines on this Thursday afternoon, June 22nd, here in South Korea. Busan's bid for the 2030 World Expo is strongly supported by the Korean government as well as corporate Korea at an official reception in Paris following the country's presentation at the BIE. And at Sorbonne University, President Yoon Suk-yeol calls for the establishment of an international body to frame out rules that allow for fair, transparent and productive use of digital technology across the globe. Meanwhile, Kia America is on the exclusive list of top 100 most influential companies as polled by US magazine Time for its remarkable innovation and success in the American EV market. We start yet again over in Paris. Tuesday's presentation to promote Busan's prospects of hosting the 2030 World Expo was followed by an official reception on Wednesday that saw the country's president and corporate leaders voicing their solidarity behind Busan's bid. Our top office correspondent Kim Do-yeon reports.
President Yoon Suk-yeol wrapped up his visit to Paris by attending the official reception for South Korea's bid to host the 2030 World Expo in Busan. A reception is held by each of the candidates competing for the expo before 179 BIE member states voted in November. The two other cities, Riyadh and Rome, hosted theirs on Monday and Tuesday respectively. President Yoon, attending with First Lady Kim Gun-hee, reiterated that the Busan Expo will be the one to unite the world to create a solution platform for global crises, which has been labeled the Busan Initiative.
기후변화, 디지털 전환, 식량, 보건, 그리고 교육 분야에서 협력 확대 방안을 모색할 것이며 모든 나라가 자신의 고유한 문화와 전통을 마음껏 표현할 수 있는 문화 엑스포를 구현할 것입니다.
Also attending the reception were prominent Korean business leaders such as Samsung Electronics Chairman Lee Jae-yong and Hyundai Motors Chung Hee-sun. Acknowledging their presence, President Yoon underscored South Korea's advanced technology and said the Busan Expo will have the most advanced technology and the world could come together to share ideas and innovation.
부산 세계 박람회에서 잉태되는 새로운 기술과 아이디어는 인류의 지속 가능한 발전, 국제사회의 번영에 기여할 것입니다.
According to the top office, as President Yoon was meeting with attendees, he heard good responses regarding the presentation at the General Assembly. Prior to this reception, President Yoon also attended a ceremony for investing by European companies into South Korea. There, 6 high-tech European companies pledged $940 million of investment into South Korea. The companies include Imerys, a French battery solution manufacturer, Umicore, a Belgian cathodes company, and Continental, a German auto parts company. They're expected to build production facilities, R&D centers, and wind power plants in South Korea. President Yoon vowed to support them during the process.
글로벌 스탠다드에 맞지 않는 규제는 과감하게 철폐하고 첨단 산업과 공급망 안정에 기여하는 기업에게는 확실한 인센티브를 제공하겠습니다. 투자 과정에서 필요한 지원이나 어려움이 있으면 언제든지 저와 한국 정부에 말씀해 주시기 바랍니다.
According to the top office, with this latest investment commitment, South Korea has now gained $16.5 billion in overseas investment in the first half of this year, the most ever for the same period. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Also in Paris, President Yoon Suk-yeol has proposed the founding of an international body to frame out shared rules that serve to better shape the future of global digital order. Our senior correspondent Oh Soo-young reports from the French capital city.
President Yoon Suk-yeol has proposed a new global body and a universal set of norms for digital development to ensure that the freedom and welfare of people around the world are not harmed by technology. The South Korean leader announced his Paris initiative on Wednesday, speaking at the Sorbonne University in the French capital.
발명, 기술 개발, 예술 창작 등 사람과 AI의 콜라보를 통한 놀라운 성과를 만들어내는 한편 그 독창성의 원천과 법적 권리 관계에 관해 엄청난 혼란을 빚어내고 있습니다. 또한 그 과정과 결과에 대한 통제가 불가능해지는 중대한 사회적 리스크를 일으키기도 합니다. 그렇기 때문에 국제적으로 통용되는 보편적 디지털 질서가 중요합니다.
Given the borderless, immediate and connected nature of digital technologies, Yoon said a universal digital order is needed on a global scale. He first and foremost established that digital advancement should serve to expand human freedom, dignity and welfare. Second, Yoon noted that a clear definition of rights to digital use and assets needs to be clarified to promote active transactions and the development of data. In this regard, digital access should be open for all, with digital literacy education crucial for such efforts. Yoon called for global collaboration to bridge digital literacy gaps. Deeming data and digital information public goods, the President emphasised that fair access and equal opportunity for all should be guaranteed. He further raised the need for a fair evaluation and reward system to incentivise investments and development efforts. In order to prevent social harm, Yoon also said information on social risks must be shared and publicised promptly with a regulatory system in place. Any violation would be deemed illegal and sanctioned. Most importantly, the South Korean leader said the international community must join hands in such regulatory efforts. He proposed creating a global body to standardise and initiate such basic norms within the context of the digital economy and society. To establish the institution, he suggested United Nations organisations could lead the conversation, noting that the President was inspired by various discussions, including at the G20 Davos and the New York Digital Vision Forum last September. His economic secretary said a multilateral set of norms will continue to be developed through intellectual discourse.
It is especially meaningful that the initiative was proposed in Paris, the birthplace of the Enlightenment and the Civil Revolution.
The Secretary said the President's initiative is not just limited to artificial intelligence, but can cover the entire digital spectrum and be applied universally in all countries in any stage of their digital transformation. 오수영, Arirang News, Paris.
President Yoon Suk-yeol's state visit to Vietnam begins on this Thursday. He is being accompanied by an unprecedented 205-member business delegation on this visit to Korea's third-largest trading partner. The welcoming ceremony, summit and state dinner will be held tomorrow, that is Friday, hosted by Vietnamese President Vo Van Thuong. Topping the summit agenda are ways to boost bilateral ties, which were upgraded to a comprehensive strategic partnership last December. President Yoon is also scheduled to sit down with Vietnamese politicians, as well as business leaders and overseas Koreans. Cesium levels at beaches in the coastal city of Busan are safe. Now, this is according to Vice Minister of Oceans and Fisheries Song Sang-geun at a briefing on this Thursday, amid public concerns here over Japan's upcoming discharge of radioactive wastewater from its devastated Fukushima nuclear power plant. His latest words of reassurance also follow his earlier claim that cesium levels in the country's East Sea have remained unchanged since 2011, when a massive quake crippled the nuclear plant in Fukushima. He also announced that cesium tests will be conducted at other local beaches, including those in Incheon and on Jeju Island. Minister Song further dismissed speculation about sun-dried salt being contaminated by radioactive wastewater from Fukushima. Kia America has charted a course onto the list of top 100 most influential companies as seen by Time magazine for its drive up the chart in EV sales in the U.S. market. Our Yoon Jin reports.
Every year since 2021, Time magazine releases its annual list of 100 most influential companies split in 5 categories: leaders, disruptors, innovators, titans, and pioneers. And for the 2023 list, 3 South Korean companies have made it onto the top 100. Samsung and SK Group were listed under the Titans category as smartphone trendsetters and battery makers. And Kia America made it to the top of the list in the Innovators category for its unexpected race to the top of the U.S. electric vehicle sales. Kia vehicles have a new reputation. Kia America President and CEO Yoon said during an interview with Time magazine that people are surprised when they get into a Kia vehicle because it's not the Kia they remember. In 2022, 60% of its customers were new to the brand. Tesla still holds pole position in U.S. electric vehicle sales, but Kia America shed its reputation for inexpensive cars and hit a new annual sales record in 2022 with its launch of the EV6 crossover, which took the brand into second place in EV sales for most of the year in the U.S. Kia America has been harmed by last year's Inflation Reduction Act, which requires EVs to be assembled in North America in order to qualify for tax credits. But CEO Yoon says the company is gradually overcoming the challenge thanks to the tax credits offered for leasing. To stay in the race for U.S. electric vehicle dominance, Kia is planning to begin production of their newest EV, the EV9, in West Point, Georgia next year. 15 EV models are planned for Kia's global lineup by 2027. 이은진, Arirang News.
Also in the U.S., the head of the Federal Reserve has reiterated the likelihood of rate hikes within the year to better tackle inflation following this month's pause. Our Kim Yan-sung has more on his remarks.
More Fed rate hikes are to be expected in the future. That's what Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell hinted at his testimony before the House Financial Services Committee on Wednesday.
Inflation pressures continue to run high, and the process of getting inflation back down to 2% has a long way to go.
His words came just a week after the Fed's brief pause on one of the most hawkish rate hiking campaigns in history, 10 straight rate hikes nonstop from March 2022. Right now, the Fed rate stands at 5 to 5.25%. However, on Wednesday, Powell made clear that this was not a pivot, but just a cool down in speed.
It may make sense to move rates higher, but to do so at a more moderate pace.
He said that while there were signs of slight improvement in the labor market, there was still an imbalance of labor demand exceeding the supply of workers. Also, inflation still hovers high above the target 2%, with total personal consumption expenditures rising 4.4% for the year ending in April. Powell said that it could take some time for the full effects of the Fed's monetary tightening policies to trickle down through the economy. The latest projections from the majority of Fed officials suggest there to be at least 2 more rate hikes this year, which would push rates to a 22-year high. Kim Yan-sung, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, at the local parliament back on Wednesday, in line with public calls for a tougher stance against stalkers, lawmakers have passed a bill that paves the path to criminal consequences for the act of stalking, even in the absence of consent from the victim. Our national Assembly correspondent Han Sung-woo reports.
Moving forward, stalkers in South Korea can be subject to criminal punishment even without consent from the victims. During a plenary session on Wednesday, the National Assembly expanded the standards to criminalize the act of stalking by unanimously passing some key revisions to the Stalking Punishment Act.
As all 246 of the 246 lawmakers present have voted in support, I declare that the partial revision to the Act on the Punishment of Stalking Crimes has been passed.
A campaign pledge of President Yoon, the revision had been eagerly sought after the existing law's flaws were exposed in the Shindang Station murder case in Seoul last year, where a 28-year-old woman was stabbed to death by her stalker of 3 years, a 31-year-old man, while he was on trial without detention for stalking. Crime analysts said at the time that stalkers were taking advantage of the consent loophole by threatening victims to withdraw their complaints. Wednesday's revisions will also allow courts, if they judge it necessary to protect victims during hearings, to require stalkers to wear electronic anklets even before conviction. Perpetrators who remove or damage the devices will face imprisonment of up to 3 years or a fine of up to 30 million Korean won, which is around $23,000.
I believe the revised bill contains at least a general overview of most of the things that can be thought of to protect victims of stalking crimes.
The revision also classifies acts of recklessly sending texts, photos, or video files through electronic devices as stalking. Providing the personal information or location of victims to third parties, or stealing such information to impersonate them online will be criminalized as well. 한성우, Arirang News.
A man and a child drowned when their migrant boat carrying over 60 people bound for Spain's Canary Islands sank. According to Spain's Maritime Rescue, their bodies were discovered Wednesday in waters off the western coast of Morocco. 24 people have been rescued thus far and the rest remain missing, raising fears of a greater death toll. A Spanish NGO known as Walking Borders has alleged that relevant Spanish officials failed to promptly respond to the migrants' calls for help. The NGO monitors migrant boats in the region in case of emergencies. Here in Capitol Hill, a forum to assess government policies has shed fresh light on the need to better consider Korea's aging population and its female workforce when drafting related measures. Our Moon Hye-ryun has more.
South Korea's Policy Evaluation Research Institute held a symposium for the first time since its establishment last year to celebrate its one-year anniversary across 2 days. 15 professors and government agency officials from the United States, Singapore, Japan, Hong Kong, and South Korea came together to present their research and findings about policy evaluation. Following the first day, which hosted sessions on policy evaluations for welfare and tax policy, Day 2 on Wednesday was focused on how economic policy should consider the aging population and low participation of women in South Korea's workforce. According to the Korean Statistical Information Service on Monday, there was a 31% increase in the population of those aged over 60 from 2018, and in May this year, there were more people in their 60s in employment than those in their 20s. And according to Professor Ronald Lee from the University of California, Berkeley, this is exactly what the government should be encouraging, incentivizing older adults to work longer and retire later to reduce the need to depend on the younger population for future support. But sometimes policies created with the best of intentions lead to unexpected outcomes. In 2012, paid family leave, enabling parents to up to 3 years off work, was extended to part-time workers. But research showed that this actually had an adverse effect.
Employment fell 34% within the year of first birth and fell 14% 5 years later. So there seemed to be disemployment effects from this 2012 expansion.
Professor Kim Kyung-hwan, the former Vice Minister of the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport, spoke of the importance of policy evaluation as a result.
So there are many policies that were designed to help people, but end up making things more difficult for the people. So policy should be evaluated on the basis of outputs, results, not by intention.
He also discussed how vulnerable groups, including older adults in South Korea's aging population, need to be a factor in the government's housing policies going forward.
Government need to focus its policy intervention on improving the housing conditions of the disadvantaged, low-income, young people, the poverty population among the elderly, and so on.
With the Policy Evaluation Research Institute developing its policy evaluation platform for members of the public, experts hope that policies designed to help people actually do help people in the future. Moon Hye-ryun, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. In the North Atlantic Ocean, the rescue operation for the missing submersible taking tourists to the wreckage of the Titanic has reported hearing banging sounds. The sounds were detected on Tuesday and Wednesday, but the source has not been confirmed. It's a race against time to find the submersible, as it's believed that the 5 people on board have less than 12 hours of oxygen remaining. The search operation is now covering a surface area twice the size of the U.S. state of Connecticut. But operations are challenging due to the remote search area. The Titanic lies 600 kilometers off the coast of Newfoundland and almost 4 kilometers below the ocean's surface. OceanGate, the firm behind the Titanic trip, was previously warned by a former employee that its experimental vessel could face catastrophic problems. Turning over to Paris, at least 37 people have been injured following an explosion on Wednesday in a building close to the French capital's Latin Quarter. 4 of the injured are in serious condition. Search operations are also underway for 2 people believed to be missing beneath the rubble. Hundreds of firefighters have been deployed to the area and have extinguished a fire resulting from the blast. The cause of the explosion is still being investigated, but it's believed to have been caused by a gas leak. To Honduras now, at least 46 women have been killed during a riot at a women's prison about 25 kilometers from the country's capital. According to local authorities, Tuesday's riot was a gang-led response to efforts to crack down on corruption in the prison. Most of those killed were burned to death as gang members reportedly went to the cells of rivals and locked them in before dousing them with a flammable liquid. Others were shot or hacked to death with machetes. Some of the bodies are still being identified. Honduran President Xiomara Castro said the riot was planned by gangs and that guards at the 900-person penitentiary had known it would take place. And finally, yoga enthusiasts around the world celebrated International Day of Yoga on Wednesday. In Times Square, over 8,000 people took part in a program called Mind Over Madness Yoga. The day also saw people across India practice the meditative exercise on aircraft carriers, in the mountains, and on trains. Observed every year on June 21st, International Day of Yoga was adopted by the United Nations in 2014. The day was even observed by Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who was at the UN in New York while on a state visit to the United States. Yoga is a physical, mental, and spiritual practice that started in India over 5,000 years ago. Matthew Ashley, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. After some very welcomed relief from the heat yesterday, despite the high humidity and sprinkles, temperatures are set to rise again. Then sweltering heat is in the forecast to end the week and into the weekend. Well, we had sunny skies to start off the day, then mostly cloudy skies with scattered rain showers are expected during the day, with thunderstorms and hail at times, with up to 40 millimeters of rain in the forecast. Jeju and the South Coast regions will be under sunnier skies with stronger UV rays. It's Dano today, considered to be one of the major traditional holidays. And on this day, farmers got to have a short break after rice planting and also wish for a fruitful harvest. Meanwhile, afternoon highs are 4 to 7 degrees higher than yesterday with decent air quality nationwide all day today. Now, monsoon rain is forecasted on Sunday on the South Coast and Jeju, and the whole nation will be affected by a monsoonal front early next week. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
And those are the headlines at this hour. But do stay with us for our panel session coming up next. Thank you for now.
Busan, Korea is already reaching the entire world. Like ocean waves that travel far and wide. It's Busan, the perfect World Expo city. Transforming our world, navigating toward a better future. World Expo 2030, Busan, Korea.
Contour the world, simply contour. India, the United Kingdom, New Zealand. Woo!
I'm excited. You excited?
Of course.
Yeah.
Music, start.
춥지 않은가요? 처음 태어난 이별에서 사는 우리 손잡아요.
Lotte takes a new leap beyond its boundaries. Our change will lead to better lives for all. New Lotte, the power of a better world. New today, better tomorrow. Lotte.
President Yoon Suk-yeol's trips to France to boost Busan's bid for the 2030 World Expo and to Vietnam to promote broader partnerships have been accompanied by leading players in the corporate as well as cultural sectors. So what has been the response with respect to Korea's overall mission in Paris? What is the broader importance of hosting the 2030 World Expo for Korea? And what is on the summit agenda between Korea and Vietnam? Welcome to Issues and Insiders. Today, we touch upon President Yoon Suk-yeol's diplomatic agenda in France and in Vietnam this week. Now, for more, I have Professor Choi Hyun-jin from Kyung-hee University here in the studio. Professor Choi, it's good to have you back.
Good afternoon, Sunny.
I also have Kwon Soa with us. Soa, good to have you here.
Happy to be here.
Right, so let's begin with details of President Yoon Suk-yeol's speech at the International Bureau of Expositions to boost Busan's bid for the 2030 World Expo.
Sure. So the speech was one part of the fourth round of presentations before the host city is chosen in November. So President Yoon Suk-yeol decided to stand at the podium himself. And this happened at the 172nd General Assembly of the BIE in Paris on a Tuesday local time. So let me give you a rundown of President Yoon's bid to the international audience and his reasons for why Busan should host the 2030 World Expo. President Yoon showed confidence in that Korea is a qualified candidate to host the World Expo, emphasizing the country has fully been investing in preparations for the big event. With that, he vowed Korea will make it the, quote, best World Expo of all time. And that, he said, will be done through the Busan Initiative, in which Korea will be at the forefront to tackle humanity's urgent challenges, which have changed immensely in the world we're living today. New uncertainties and crises, with the World Expo in Busan able to become a solutions platform for those crises. As a country that has gone through a devastating war 70 years ago, President Yoon mentioned the international community's help in South Korea's transformation into an economic powerhouse, and that Korea now wants to return the help it has received and share its development experiences with the world. The challenges he highlighted were war and conflict, weapons of mass destruction, terrorism, digital divide, economic inequality, food crises, and climate change. He also took the opportunity to depict the attractiveness of the city of Busan, which he said is a gateway to the Eurasian continent. He called it a maritime city reaching the oceans, a city of adventure, and a city of the future. The president also touched upon the many new business opportunities with Korea's state-of-the-art digital technology to act as a wonderful stage for exchange, and promoted the Busan Expo as a culture expo that will highly value cultural diversity and also be a great venue for young generations to work hand in hand as a community. Now, President Yoon Suk-yeol finished up his speech by expressing his hopes for the 2030 Busan Expo to be remembered as one shifting the world's priority from competition to solidarity. And let me end by quoting some of his final words. Busan is ready. We are united. Let's transform our world and navigate toward a better future. And for a change, I did not have to translate the script because all of this was said in English.
Right, in English. And
yes.
Before we proceed any further, Professor Choi, what are your personal thoughts regarding the president's latest speech in English on the global stage?
Before this event, President Yoon Suk-yeol also gave a speech in English at the U.S. Capitol in this April. And at the time, the U.S. lawmakers say that it was amazing and cool. And when non-native politicians give a speech in English, they usually sound like they are reading from a manuscript. But the local reaction to Yoon's speech was very enthusiastic. Yoon's English speech have a simple and clear message that anyone graduated from so-called middle school can understand easily. So rather than using difficult words or flashy sentences, he speaks naturally as if he were talking to someone next to him. So English presentation for the Busan Expo bid, which was presented in Paris 2 days ago, also received many favorable reviews, and one of them was Representative Woo Won-sik of the opposition Democratic Party of Korea, and who praised Yoon Suk-yeol's English speech. And he also said that a job well done should be called job well done. And he said the President Yoon did a good job of explaining the advantages of Busan with the keywords of future and promise, and especially the appeal of Korea as a high-tech and cultural powerhouse, and returning the favor and help received from the international community was a key content that actually differentiated Korea from other competitors, including Saudi Arabia. So as a citizen, so regardless of the success of the Busan Expo bid, I'd like to applaud such a present effort on the global stage.
Right, indeed. And beyond this presidential address, so I believe quite a number of other South Korean figures addressed the audience at the BIE. Could you tell us a bit about them and their messages?
Sure. Now, first off, the first speaker, and to my opinion, who delivered a very strong and impressive speech, was famous Korean rapper or singer Psy, who's very famous for Gangnam Style, which went viral across the world around a decade ago. So he appealed to the General Assembly through his own personal story as a musician who experienced the power of K-pop that unites, transforms, and transcends boundaries. Psy expressed his gratefulness about his hit song still being remembered today and for it still bringing together people whenever it plays. He also mentioned the flash mob in Paris at the Eiffel Tower before. And with that, he wished for the Busan World Expo to do the same in 2030 to, quote, bring the world together and shape a better future for all of us. Now, the world star in his presentation focused a lot on the K-wave or Hallyu, demonstrating how the success of K-pop, K-drama, and K-movie was possible, and also making the audience imagine such vibrant energy we feel from these cultural delights to be brought to the expo. Let me also quote some of Psy's words at the presentation, which were also uttered in English. For instance, he said that we will, quote, demonstrate our commitment to global cooperation and innovation. We'll share our journey, our growth, and our vision for a sustainable future. And also interesting that he linked his experience as a hardworking artist to the characteristics of the Korean people that have undergone a rapid transformation since the Korean War. So similar to what President Yoon also mentioned in his speech later on. And Psy also, as he is a very fun person himself, he had a touch of wittiness in his speech. He referred to bibimbap, a very famous Korean dish, when he was referring to mixing different genres in K-pop, K-drama, or K-cinema. And he also put on his sunglasses at the end so that people can, remember his physique during his music video in Gangnam Style. Now, meanwhile, less known to the public, but also part of the presentation delegation were Professor Jin Yang-gyo at Hongik University, and he's also a chief architect of Busan's proposed World Expo site, who introduced the designs of the site that embody the themes of the expo. And Lee Soo-in, co-founder and CEO of tech company Enuma that creates digital learning solutions for children, explained the Busan Expo's vision to address humanity's challenges through collaboration across borders so that technology can change human life for the better. And renowned soprano Sumi Jo, or Jo Sumi, and Karina, which I think also saw in the video just before, leader of K-pop group aespa, took part in the pitch as well, appearing on screen. And beyond these presentations, what also backed Korea's bid was the presence of a business delegation, including Samsung Electronics Executive Chairman Lee Jae-yong, SK Group Chairman Choi Tae-won, and Hyundai Motor Group Executive Chair Lee Sun-chung.
Right, united effort right there.
Yes.
Professor Chair, efforts to bring home the 2030 World Expo have been evident under the former Liberal as well as the current Conservative administrations. Now, that being said, why is hosting the 2030 World Expo so important for South Korea?
First, I need to explain that there are 4 types of expo organized by BIE. The first one is World Expo, then Specialized Expo, and there are 2 other expos as well. So of this, World Expo is the largest and the most expensive event. And we had an expo in the past. So both Daejeon Expo and the Yeosu Expo were both specialized expo. So if Busan is selected at the BIE General Assembly in this November, South Korea will host the World Expo event for the first time. So it will also be the 7th country in the world after France, US, Canada, Japan, Germany, and Italy to host all 3 mega international events, including the Olympic, World Cup, and the World Expo. So Expo helps to boost a host country's public image and national prestige, and also on a more practical level, hosting an Expo is expected to bring a huge economic benefit, especially in terms of job creation and the tourism. The South Korea estimates that hosting the 2030 World Expo will generate 61 trillion Korean won in output and also 500,000 jobs. So these numbers are greater than those of the 2002 World Cup game and also 2018 Pyeongchang Winter Olympic Games. And that's why the 2030 Busan Expo was adopted as a national priority in 2019 by the progressive Moon Jae-in administration. And also, as when he was a presidential candidate, the Yoon also included the Busan Expo in his campaign promises. And also at the press conference to mark the 100th day in office, the President Yoon said that he would focus his efforts on convincing BIE member states to accept Busan's bid.
Right, indeed. And on the sidelines of his efforts with the BIE, or at the BIE, I should say, President also sat down with French President Emmanuel Macron on the sidelines of all that. What was on their agenda as well?
Right, Presidents Yoon and Macron held a bilateral summit. They had a luncheon meeting, and they also had a joint press briefing on the occasion of President Yoon's trip to France. So ranging from economy to regional security, the two leaders agreed to increase cooperation in many fields of mutual concern. The bilateral summit took place at Élysée Palace, the official residence of the French president, on Tuesday local time. It was held for around 2 hours. So first, on the security front, the two leaders vowed for closer cooperation against threats from North Korea, noting South Korea's election to the UN Security Council's non-permanent membership starting next year. Macron congratulated Seoul for being chosen to the UNSC, and he said that Seoul can expect Paris's support in terms of coping with the North Korean nuclear crisis, namely to achieve, quote, complete, verifiable, and irreversible denuclearization. And he added France will continue to strongly denounce the North's violations of human rights as well. Now on to economic discussions. If you remember last week in our preview to President Yoon's overseas trip, we talked a little bit about the economic partnership between South Korea and France, which goes back to the 1960s. And last year, the two also hit a record high bilateral trade volume. So the two discussed ways to further expand on that robust partnership. They had talks on future strategic industries like space and aviation, including cooperation between France's Airbus and South Korean businesses once South Korea launches its own National Aeronautics Administration, which is also referred to as South Korea's version of NASA. Technological cooperation such as clean energy was discussed as well, and they also shared views on building stable supply chains. Now, meanwhile, according to Seoul's presidential office, President Yoon requested France to help ensure that new trade laws pushed by the European Union do not discriminate against South Korean companies. And other than that, President Yoon recognized the French president's leadership in supporting Ukraine and in the war initiated by Russia, of course, and vowed to actively work for the peace and also reconstruction of Ukraine. The bilateral meeting was also known to have been another opportunity for President Yoon to ask for France's support to South Korea's aim to host the World Expo, of course, in Busan.
Right, in 2030.
Yeah.
Also on the diplomatic front, Professor Che, French President Emmanuel Macron has been advocating strategic autonomy amid tensions between the U.S. and China. Now, some scholars say that the Yoon administration should seek to do the same given Korea's trade ties with China and, of course, security ties with the U.S. What do you say?
That's a very difficult question, and it is true that the French Macron administration is trying to maintain some strategic autonomy or balance between China and the United States. And the world faced by China is not very different from ours. And Korea will encounter a greater Chinese presence and influence in East Asia. And Russia has also become highly dependent on China. And North Korea has no choice but to get closer to China in the future. And as a result, the solidarity of the so-called Northern Triangle of North Korea, China, and Russia appeared on the Korean Peninsula. And South Korea is also likely to work with the United States and Japan to establish a new Southern Triangle relationship. So in such situations, South Korea needs to strengthen strategic relations with its ally, but also maintain the friendly relations with neighboring China. Because the relation with China has a huge economic and security implications for South Korea. But however, this critical time is also a golden opportunity for South Korea to formalize our diplomatic principles to China. As China steps up its political offensive, demanding that we respect their core interests and core concerns, we must also demand that the Chinese government must respect our principles as well. First, the China should respect our core interests, including our security and the territorial integrity, which is a top priority for us. So calling for refraining from unauthorized entry into our waters and skies. And the second principle is to respect our denuclearization of North Korea and the peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. So we should strongly demand China's contribution and support for such goals, including denuclearization and the peaceful reunification.
Right, of course. Also, Professor Che, France, it's reportedly hoping for an invitation, I understand, to the next summit of BRICS to be held in South Africa in August. What message do you suppose does this hope send to the broader global community?
The French president hopes to become the first Western leader to be invited to BRICS meeting. So South Africa will host the next summit of the BRICS nations, including Brazil, Russia, China, India, and South Africa. And all these countries, they remain close to Moscow, despite Putin's invasion of Ukraine. So these 5 large emerging economies are the counterpart to the G7, a group of Western industrialized countries. So the summit usually includes the top leaders of these 5 countries. And if Macron is invited to attend, he would be the first Western leader to do so. So members of the BRICS are all emerging economies that represent the interests of developing nations. So as a developed country, could France be influential at the BRICS meeting? So, and if France were to participate, what kind of chemistry could it generate? So I'm very curious about these questions. But leaving aside all other specific factors, in a present situation where the confrontation between East and West is intensifying, I think there is a need for someone like Macron who can cross ideological and geopolitical barriers and break from mental and conceptual bias. So therefore, this potential visit could have some unexpected positive outcome on the relation between East and West, and including the ongoing war in Ukraine.
Right, hopefully, of course. So beyond France, President Yoon Suk-yeol's latest diplomatic agenda also includes a state visit to Vietnam. What has been shared about his agenda there?
Well, not much yet, but economic cooperation is expected to be the major topic there. And obvious just by the fact that a 205-member business delegation delegation is traveling with the president there, which is the largest ever. So President Yoon Suk-yeol and Vietnamese President Vo Van Thuong are scheduled to hold their one-on-one on Friday, and they are going to talk about many issues based on their elevated bilateral ties that were elevated to a comprehensive strategic partnership last year. And Yoon, however, spoke to a Vietnamese agency ahead of his visit to Vietnam, in which he emphasized the need to grow cooperation beyond manufacturing, covering finance, information technology, culture, and service. And he also spoke about stronger security cooperation, and that includes stronger ties in the defense sector and maritime defense to ensure a rules-based order in the Indo-Pacific region.
Right. Professor Che, how important is engagement with Vietnam to further advance the Yoon administration's Indo-Pacific strategy, do you think?
So the President Yoon will meet with the Vietnamese leader and senior officials to discuss a shared vision for a connected, prosperous, and peaceful Indo-Pacific region. And Vietnam supports a norm-based international order, just like us, and many of South Korea's major companies have expanded their bases in Vietnam, and therefore Vietnam is a key link in our global supply chain. So in addition, Vietnam plays a central role in ASEAN, an organization of Southeast Asian countries with a significant Chinese influence, and therefore strengthening ties with Vietnam can provide an opportunity for Korea to expand its influence on ASEAN countries as well. So also, it is important to know that Vietnam has been in dispute with China over territorial claims in the South China Sea. And in such a situation, the President Yoon said that South Korea will strengthen maritime security cooperation with Vietnam and expand the defense industry cooperation. And I guess, and this is some attempt to support Vietnam in its territorial dispute with China and to keep China in check in our neighboring water.
Right. Meanwhile, so with regard to business interactions or potential business interactions between the two countries, I understand the business delegation that you mentioned also include a few new names. Could you tell us a bit more?
Sure. So the, maybe I should say, old names or familiar names are the ones that I already mentioned that also were in France, the leaders of Samsung Electronics, LG, SK, and so forth. But let me focus on one fairly fresh name among the delegation, which is the only celebrity among that delegation. That's Park Jae-bum, or Jay Park, more known as a rapper, singer, and music producer. In fact, he is the CEO of popular Korean soju maker One Spirits, which produces the traditionally distilled soju called One Soju. So these K-products collaborated with stars is always a great strategy to spread more of Korean items to the world. And if the star is a CEO, in this case, it's going to have another positive impact, especially because Hallyu is also been seen as the best ambassador for South Korea in Vietnam, because in the late 1990s, Vietnam started to have interest in K-dramas, and then that spread to other interests in K-pop, travel packages to Korea, K-beauty, and so forth. And that especially proves true because it's said that the Korean wave intersects with social changes Vietnam has been experiencing. A forward-looking attitude, modern and intriguing culture appears to be reflected in Korean culture items.
Right, I see. Good to know. Well, I suppose we'll have more to talk about once President Yoon Suk-yeol sits down with Vietnamese counterpart Vo Van Thuong tomorrow. That is Friday. All right, so thank you for those updates. And Professor Che, as always, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
Right, well, that ends Thursday's edition of Issues and Insiders. Thank you for watching.